All right, that was Thaddeus Russell, author of Renegade History of the United States. I am now joined by my friend Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks, from Jacobins weekend show that she co-hosts with our friend Nando Vila. How are you doing today, Anna?
I'm doing well, Ben. How are you?
I am pretty good. So this is not the main thing that I want to talk to you about today, but I do have to ask. So you just had a chance to interview Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we interviewed him. We did a pre-tape. I think it was a day or two before the Capitol riots took place. So we didn't ask him about that, but I really enjoyed the interview. We got a full hour with him, which I think, is the appropriate amount of time to speak with Noam Chomsky. I had interviewed him last year or 2 years ago, I guess, now that I think about it, geez. And it was only for 20 minutes. And it's just, you can't get to everything you want to get to in 20 minutes. So it was fantastic. I highly recommend everyone check it out on Jacobin's YouTube page, youtube.com/JacobinMag.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that Chomsky probably has a more impressive record of being right about things over the course of a longer period of time than just about anybody else that I can think of off the top of my head, going back to the when he was first when he first stopped being just the most important linguist in the world and started doing the political things that he was doing during the Vietnam War. Happy to see Kale, producer from Jacobin, in the chat there. I think pushing back against some of what Thaddeus was saying in the interview, perhaps, but yeah. So Kale. You said, yeah.
Kale's the producer for the weekend show, and he's fantastic. He's just so great. He's such a great person to work with. So I'm really happy to see his comments.
Yeah. No, I always really enjoy Kale, but yeah. So you said you interviewed Chomsky before the Capitol riots, and so I do want to talk about this. So we kind of alluded to this a little bit at the very beginning of the show, but this is something, I guess I've been sort of struggling to find the right balance here between a couple of things, one of which is just acknowledging that, my crystal ball is certainly on the fritz. Like I definitely won't pretend to have seen this coming. I think this is a crazy escalation from what we've seen before, even though there was kind of a miniature version of it in Michigan over I think back in the spring, maybe at the state capitol in Michigan. But even so, like it's something that is shocking. That like it's genuinely bizarre that this happened. That there was not just like a right-wing riot near the Capitol, which would have been certainly big news in itself, but that it happened in the Capitol. That there were people. Some of the reports that came out from it, that there were congressmen who were like breaking apart pieces of furniture, in case they needed to have clubs. So this is a deeply strange thing that happened, and a really disturbing thing that happened, and something we absolutely don't want to minimize, which is a mistake I think some people have made. But I think it's also important to not treat it as something that, like, I think the worst case scenario from what would happen on Wednesday was not that, like, democracy would have been overthrown and, we would have, I don't think there's any way that would have been the outcome, which I think might be an important thing to clarify because of some of what might be coming down the pike, in response to it. But I'm not sure I have all the answers here. Like I don't know exactly. And I think even looking at like the ways that people have been struggling to find the right language to describe, what happened, right? Is this a coup? Is it a riot? Is it something in between? Is it an insurrection, which is a word that you don't hear a lot, but as I've been hearing everywhere, for the last week, I think probably reflect people trying to find that balance. So where do you come down on all of that?
Well, I mean, I definitely think what happened is incredibly serious, and I have been turned off by some of the discourse that I've seen among, some more prominent figures on the left that I typically agree with on pretty much everything. But like this effort to kind of minimize it. And more importantly, I'm seeing some people even ridicule and criticize lawmakers like AOC, for instance, who shared with the country just how terrifying it was and how much she felt that her own life was at risk. And to be sure, I mean, you have photos of these right-wing zealots with, someone told me not to call them zip ties because it even minimizes what it is, but those flexi cuffs, with the intention of holding members of Congress hostage. Like, let's not minimize it and understand that what happened was in fact serious. Also, I would just urge a little bit of consistency because for all of the rhetoric that I've seen and heard regarding failed coup attempts in Venezuela, and to be sure, they were failed coup attempts. This was also a failed attempt to essentially throw out a democratic process, a democratically elected, outcome. And I think that that's an issue. I think that the intentions of what they wanted to do matters. I agree with you that the probability or possibility of an actual successful coup is unlikely, but that doesn't change the fact that they were intending on essentially ensuring that someone who was not democratically elected, Donald Trump, serves another term, and who knows, maybe even serves indefinitely as president. And that's just beyond horrendous behavior that was egged on and encouraged not just by right-wing media, which is an issue, but it was encouraged, and now some new reporting indicates was even organized by Republican lawmakers. And that is a problem. That is a huge problem that should be dealt with appropriately. Now, on the other hand, though, I totally hear what you're saying about striking a balance, because the last thing we need is to, support any type of like hyperbolic rhetoric that can allow for lawmakers to beef up an already militarized, security state to something even more egregious, right? Like, I don't think we need additional national security laws that focus on white supremacists. I think that would be disastrous. We clearly already have too many resources pumped into policing and the security state as it is. The real question here, though, is why is it that when it comes to certain protesters like Black Lives Matter, police departments will rain terror on the protesters, but when it comes to what happened last week with the Capitol Hill riots, seems like in a lot of cases, police just let it happen, right?
Yeah, I mean,
police, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because we're not even talking, I think, there were a lot of people at the original rally. I think there were tens of thousands of people, at the original rally at the White House, and a lot of those walked over to the Capitol. But I think the actual number of people inside the Capitol was, I've seen people say several hundred. I've seen people say maybe as much as a couple thousand. But there are probably as many Capitol cops as that, right? Like that's not like the actual. They should have been able to stop this. It shouldn't have been any problem to stop this. And I think that's probably the most objectively. I mean, maybe there will be other things that come out in terms of what you're talking about. The sort of role of Republican lawmakers, certainly in organizing the initial rally, maybe in some of the things that happen after that. But as far as the things that we know right now, I think the most objectively shocking part is that the Capitol cops let it happen, and I think we know that they. I mean, obviously there were people who were taking selfies with the mob that was coming into to the Capitol, and this is something they stop people from doing this all the time. Like this is a routine thing that they do. Like in 2007, there were anti-war Iraq veterans who were trying to go into the Capitol to protest, and you can see the pictures of of the cops like lining up like a couple deep to stop them from doing this. So I think that you can say, and this is actually important because of what you're talking about. about calls for new, laws about domestic terrorism. That would be like, I mean, given how bad what we already have in the books are, I can't even imagine, what that would look like. And actually, I mean, it's funny, you mentioned people who have maybe, overdosed on a certain kind of online contrarianism, getting, mocking AOC for expressing that, people are afraid that that members of this mob would come in and kill them. But to her credit, I think Forrest, we have that tweet that she has struck, I think exactly the right note here. So this is so people might not be able to see it on there, but in the quoted tweets from Norman Ornstein says the House must immediately pass a domestic terrorism statute with the focus on white supremacist terrorism, and send it to the Senate. And AOC in the tweet says, "I disagree. Our problem on Wednesday wasn't that there weren't enough laws, resources, or intelligence. We had them, and they were not used." So, I think, right. Yeah. So this is the distinction, right? That you don't have to say we need to beef up the policing powers of the state. You could just say, why weren't these used in the normal way that they're used?
Exactly. I mean, when you really think about the fact that these right-wingers had been planning this for weeks in plain sight on Parler, I mean, you don't even really need like highly trained national security intelligence experts to figure out what was going on. And I mean, sure, you might see those posts on Parler and think, are they serious? They're probably just, they're probably just joking around, right? Giving them the benefit of the doubt, which I personally during the Trump era would not do. But nonetheless, like, just to be safe, let's prepare. And to be sure, we know now that the Pentagon reached out to Capitol Police and asked them if they needed additional assistance in the form of National Guards, to kind of beef up security on that day. And they, for some reason, decided to reject that. And so there was a real breakdown in the planning. And I think that it was an intentional breakdown. Obviously, I'm speculating, but I think we all have good reason to think that. And so there should be an investigation into why, first of all, this double standard exists, where, over the summer, we saw, mass protests throughout the country, and there was no shortage of policing or surveillance or security when it came to that. But when it came to these insurrectionists, these rioters, to see the Capitol Police take selfies with them was just discouraging, demoralizing. To see how emboldened these people were to just kind of like roam throughout the Capitol building without hiding their identities. I mean, they genuinely did not expect to suffer any consequences for this. They felt entitled to be there. They felt entitled not only to be there, but to like vandalize property, steal mail from Nancy Pelosi's office, and then talk about it to the media. Exactly. And so I think that it's okay for the left to acknowledge that what happened was serious, while also, much like AOC, simultaneously rejecting efforts to beef up the security state more than it already is. Like, we don't need to do that. We can fight back and push back against those efforts. But I really genuinely think that messaging is important. And when people see the left, especially the online left, make fun of lawmakers for being afraid, minimize what actually took place, I really do think that it turns people off to potentially, being part of a broader coalition led by the left. So I'm just thinking about the bigger picture here, and someone who considers herself as part of the left, like, I was grossed out by a lot of what I saw online. So I would just say, like, there's no need to be hyperbolic. I'm not encouraging that, that's for sure. But I certainly do think that it's pretty destructive to the left to make it appear as if like anyone is minimizing it or thinking that this is nothing more than a joke.
Yeah, so I mean I wonder like when people when people do that, right? They go beyond saying the thing that they should say, which is that this is not like the level of threat that was posed by what happened isn't something that could only be prevented from happening again by passing a bunch of new laws and making it easier to spy on people and everything. That it would have been actually extremely easy, given what we already have, to stop it, which is part of what's scandalous about it. Whether you think that there was some, whatever level of intention you think it is, like, and honestly, it seems like it could even just be that certainly a lot of rank and file Capitol cops, people were taking selfies, and maybe even some decision makers turning down the National Guard basically see MAGA protesters as their kind of people, so they're reluctant to crack down on them. Like that's all it could take, but that's enough, right? In context, that's enough to get it done. So that you could say, okay, like if you go beyond just making that point to saying, oh, no big deal, nothing to see here. I have seen, and I have seen some of those takes. There are people who I'm not going to name any names because this is somebody I even generally like, who said that this was like, this looked more, this was like a Black Friday, in Kentucky, or I think was the phrase they used, and it's like, no, we are talking about several hundred people, fighting with the Capitol Police at certain points, smashing their way into the Capitol. In at least one case, the famous picture of the guy with the zip ties, there seemed to be a clear intention to take hostages. This is really serious, and it's really bad. And I think however you come down in terms of the debates about, okay, what do you call it, or how should we think about this? I think everybody should be able to start with that baseline if it's really serious and it's really bad. But so I guess what I'm wondering and what I want your take on is what's going on with people who don't think that, because it seems like one thing that might be a bigger issue here is that right now, like a lot of the left is in this kind of weird place because in 2016 and 2020, when Bernie ran for president, those two times, he's not going to run for president again. He'd have to have, there have to be like some amazing anti-aging breakthrough or something. So those two, which is part of the problem actually, but those two times he ran for president and everything that happened because he ran for president those two times, like the rise of DSA, the squad getting elected to Congress, all of that stuff, right? So all of that whole arc, from like 2016 to 2020, like built up the left, this kind of left that didn't really exist before then. But then now I think a lot of people are kind of panicking because Bernie lost the second time. It seems very likely there's not going to be a third time. Joe Biden is going to be president now. And so it seems like I think there's this kind of rational core maybe where people are worried that like you're just going to get sort of sucked in to just regular liberalism, because that's going to be the only game in town that's sort of left at this point. And so I think maybe some of that contrarianism comes out of that people just want to say, okay, I want to really, really differentiate myself from just like regular shitty, MSNBC liberals, which fair enough. But it seems like, and this is not the only recent example of this, some of that's coming out in really unhelpful ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone sees it. And I think I love what Matt Christman has to say about some of the discourse that takes place on Twitter, for instance, because I think that he's correct in pointing out just like the competitive nature of the members of the left wanting to outdo one another, go further and further. I think I don't remember if it was him or someone else who even compared it to like watching pornography, for instance, right? You become desensitized to it and then you need something a little more extreme each time. And I really like that analogy because I feel like there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of aimlessness right now among the left. It's leaderless at the moment. And so I think what happens is there's this like culture online where voices on the left are like trying to outdo one another and like really prove their leftist credentials. And it's just stupid. And I don't really like engaging in that kind of stuff, because what we really want to do more than anything is have thoughtful conversations about solutions. And that's really missing right now, because what we should be discussing on the left in response to the riots that took place is, okay, we have established what we don't want, which is the direction that liberals are going in with wanting, more of a police state. I don't want that. So what do we want to, hold people in positions of power accountable for egging this on or encouraging this? Those are the kinds of conversations we should be having, instead of like ridiculing AOC for genuinely being afraid for her life.
Yeah. And especially if we are worried that there is going to be like some like terrible new round of like war on terror in response to this, then the last thing that we should be doing is minimizing. I saw Ryan Grim make this point that in response to something that that Michael Tracy said, I think actually on exactly what you're saying about the sort of mocking those concerns, that look, if you're worried that stuff's coming down the pike and you want to convince as many people as possible that it should be opposed, the last thing you want to do is give them the impression that people who are opposed to that just don't think that this stuff is serious, or are sort of mocking concerns about it, because that's going to be massively discrediting to any attempt to say no, we don't need and don't want any kind of new security laws.
Exactly. People lose credibility when they minimize what happened. And I think that's just not the right way to go about it. And again, like, pushing back against the police state makes all the sense in the world. I'm in favor of that. But the second half of that discussion is, okay, then what are the solutions, right? And so that was something that Nando and I were talking about and kind of debating during the latest episode of Weekends for Jacobin. And I've been thinking about it a lot ever since, because I want solutions. I don't want to just say this is really bad and then just kind of leave it at that. But I mean, dark money played a huge role in the organizing effort to get these people to DC. So we need to have a real discussion about, doing something, not just about money in politics, but like, how about we start with dark money? Because there are all these nefarious figures behind the scenes who have provided the resources necessary to get these people to the nation's capital. Why don't we discuss ways in which we can not only investigate Republican members of Congress who have allegedly played a role in organizing this, but like, we should hold them accountable, first of all, because as we've experienced over the last few decades, the Republican Party has become more and more ballsy with what they're willing to do in order to get what they want. And it's because they have gone unchecked. The Democratic Party is incredibly weak in holding them accountable. In fact, even after these riots took place, you have like Joe Biden saying like, I don't know, we really want to do this impeachment thing. Yeah. How about like anything that we can do to send a clear sign that this is not okay, not just for Trump, but The Intercept today. Ida Chavez and Ryan Grim reported on this guy named Ali Alexander, who was like front and center of planning all of the stuff that took place. He outed 3 Republican lawmakers, and I want to name them by name because he said that they took an active role in organizing this. So Representatives Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, and Mo Brooks. And it's not just like, organizing this Stop the Steal rally for Trump, but the effort in the Capitol building. Like, I don't know how true that is. This is an allegation by someone who was front and center with organizing it. He's saying that these Republican lawmakers are involved. So can we investigate that? Can we actually do a genuine investigation? And if they were really involved in organizing this and encouraging people to breach the Capitol building, well, 14th Amendment, Section 3. This is sedition. Like they know It's not like they're stupid. These Republican lawmakers know that the Trump campaign failed in every single court battle. They failed to provide a shred of evidence of widespread voter fraud, but they encouraged this anyway. They engaged in this anyway. In the case of Senator Josh Hawley, specifically for his own political career, and to pander to Trump's base because he's eyeing a 2024 presidential run. We live in a society that encourages us to engage in the worst behavior for personal benefits and personal profit. We see it in politics. We see it in the media, including left media, which grosses me out beyond words. And at the end of the day, like, we need to call that out, because while the incentives are there, while the, financial structures are in place to like push us in the wrong direction and do, basically misinform people or to engage in, these political stunts that actually damage the country. We just got to call it out and call it what it is. Otherwise, they're just going to continue getting ballsier and ballsier, not because they genuinely believe in what they're doing, but specifically because they see it as advantageous for their own careers and their own profits.
Yeah, right. Which is certainly, I think, the case in Hawley's case that he. Like this is something, slight tangent. We're going to get back in a minute, but like, this is something that drives me crazy, that, I think even people who should know much better would give people like Josh Hawley credit for, it's like, oh, they're populists. They want to, they're they're just regular Reaganite Republicans with like better PR. Josh Hawley is against raising the minimum wage. He's against Medicare for all. He's against I'm pretty sure that if somebody actually asked him about it, he'd be against like laws against, sending little kids into working coal mines. He doesn't actually have any economic populist positions on absolutely anything, but he knows that he can mouth some of the right words sometimes. And certainly nobody in mainstream media is really that interested in pointing out, those contradictions.